The bank changed the locks on my shop at 8 in the morning. By noon, a man in a black raincoat I'd never met offered me $48 million and told me there was a price that had nothing to do with money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning, I stood in the gravel lot outside Calloway Fabrication in Maumee, Ohio, watching a kid half my age drill a new deadbolt into the door I'd hung myself 14 years earlier. He wouldn't look at me. I didn't blame him. Behind him, through the window, I could see my own welding rig, my benches, the steel I'd already paid for, all of it now belonging to people I'd never meet. 11 days before that, a judge in Toledo had finished what my ex-wife started. By the time the papers were signed, Vanessa walked away with the house, the savings, the equity in the shop, and a parenting schedule that gave me my own kids every other weekend like they were a rental. I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I'd learned a long time ago that when something is collapsing, the worst thing you can do is grab it on the way down. So I drove to a diner off the highway in Toledo, ordered coffee I had no intention of drinking, and tried to figure out where a 43-year-old man sleeps when he has 2 duffel bags and $40 to his name. That's when the man in the raincoat sat down across from me. He didn't ask. He just slid into the booth like he'd been waiting on me his whole life. "Wesley Calloway?" he said. "Depends who's asking. My name is Philip Ashcroft. I'm an estate attorney out of Boston." He set a leather folder on the table, dead center, the way a surgeon lays out tools. "I'm sorry to find you on a bad day. I tried the shop first." I almost laughed. "You and everybody else." "Mr. Calloway, I'll be direct, because I think you've had enough people talk in circles around you lately." He folded his hands. "3 weeks ago, you inherited an estate. The total value is somewhere near $48 million. The diner sounds, the fryer, the radio, 2 truckers arguing about a ball game, all of it went underwater. Say that again. A stone house on the coast of Maine, a second property on Beacon Street in Boston, 3 restored wooden boats, and an account I'm not at liberty to discuss until you sign." He didn't blink. "You have 30 days to accept. If you don't, every dollar of it goes to a maritime charity in Portland." I gripped the coffee mug just to feel something solid. "From who? I don't have family that has that kind of money. My mother's people stopped talking to us before I could walk. From your great-uncle, Silas Hartley." He let the name sit there. "He passed in March. He'd been aware of you for a very long time. Aware of me. More than that." Ashcroft reached into the folder and produced an envelope, thick paper, my full name written across the front in old, careful ink. "There's a condition. You read his letter before you decide. And one more thing." He stood, buttoned the raincoat. "He asked me to deliver a message word for word. He said, 'The storm already knows your name.' He just made sure you'd have somewhere to stand when it came." Then he was gone, out into the gray, leaving me alone with an envelope and a heartbeat I could hear in my ears. The only person I called was my sister Maggie. She'd flown up from Cincinnati twice during the divorce, sat in the back of that courtroom, held my hand in parking garages so I wouldn't fall apart in front of the kids. When I told her everything, the locks, the diner, the 48 million, a dead man I barely remembered, she was quiet for a long time. "Open the letter, Wes," she finally said. "You've been doing the right thing your whole life, and it cost you everything. Maybe it's time something paid you back." So I opened it. "Wesley, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're in trouble. I know both of those things, the way a man knows the tide is coming in, not because I can see it, but because it always does. I've watched your life from a distance for 31 years. I knew your father. I knew the kind of woman you married before you did, and I know what's about to happen to you, because it happened to me." I had to set the page down and breathe. The terms were simple and strange. To inherit, I had to live in the Maine house for 1 full year. I couldn't sell a single thing. I couldn't be away for more than 2 nights at a stretch. And every day, no exceptions, I had to spend 2 hours sitting alone in the boathouse behind the property. Not working, not fixing, just sitting. "Why a boathouse?" Maggie asked when I read it to her over the phone. You'll understand in time. One last thing, and read this twice. Your ex-wife is not finished with you. When she comes back wearing an apology, the answer to everything is in the boathouse. Don't trust her. Trust the boathouse." Maggie went silent again. Then, Wes. A man who's been dead since March knew Vanessa would come back. That's what it says. Then why are you still in Ohio? 3 weeks earlier, I'd had a marriage. Or I thought I did. It started with small things, the way it always does. A second phone, she said, was for work, charging behind the cereal boxes. A gym bag in the trunk that smelled like a cologne I didn't own. A standing client dinner. Every Thursday, for a woman who managed a dental office. The thing that broke it wasn't dramatic. It was a hotel receipt I found folded inside a coat pocket while I was getting it ready for the donation bin. Cleveland, 2 nights. She told me she was at her sister's in Columbus, and Columbus is a long way from Cleveland. I didn't confront her. My father used to say a lie is like a bridge somebody's building over a canyon. The worst thing you can do is stop them halfway. Let them finish. Let them walk all the way out to the middle. So I waited. I watched. And I said nothing while she filed for divorce 8 months later, represented by a smooth, expensive attorney named Garrett Holloway, who, I would learn, had been the man on the other side of those Thursday dinners the entire time. By the time it ended, they'd taken the house, the accounts, the shop, and the morning I packed my last bag, my daughter Hazel hugged me in the driveway and whispered, "It's okay if you cry, Dad." And I had to wait until I was 3 streets away before I did. That was the man Philip Ashcroft found in a diner. I flew into Portland and drove 2 hours up the coast to Wren Haven, a town of maybe 900 people, where the road just stops at the water. The property sat on a cliff the locals called Widow's Ledge. Gray stone house, weathered shingles, a long sloping yard that ran down to the water. And below it, set into the rock at the tide line, the boathouse. Dark green paint flaking off its boards, big enough to hold a small ship and quiet as a hell breath. A woman was waiting on the porch. 60s, sharp eyes, a wool sweater the color of the sea. "You'd be Silas's boy," she said, not a question. "Wes Calloway." "And you are?" "Esther Pruitt. I kept this house for 30 years. She studied me a long moment, the way you'd inspect a board for warping. "You've got his shoulders, and you're tired in the same place he was tired." "Where's that?" "Behind the eyes." She opened the door. "He told me the right one would come eventually. Most of that family," he said, "would have sold the whole place by lunch. You don't look like a man in a hurry." "I don't have anywhere to be," I said. She almost smiled. "Good. That's the only requirement that ever mattered." The first 2 days in the boathouse, nothing happened. I sat on an overturned crate in the cold, salt air and felt ridiculous. $48 million, and the dead man's price was that I had to be bored. On the 3rd day, I started actually looking. Pinned to the wall above the workbench was a yellowed tide chart, dozens of them stacked beneath it. But on the top one, a single date was circled in red ink, with a small arrow pointing down at the floorboards beneath the bench. I pried them up. Underneath was a steel compartment. Inside it, a leather logbook, a thick bundle of letters, and a locked strong box. The letters spanned 30 years. 30 years of my life, written down by a man I'd met maybe twice. My first bike, the year my father lost his job, the day I opened the shop, the births of both my kids. Pages and pages of a stranger who'd loved me from a distance, because something stopped him from doing it up close. Then I opened the logbook, and the most recent entries weren't memories. They were warnings, written directly to me. "She will call within 2 months of the funeral. She'll be gentle. She'll talk about the children, about regret, about how things got out of hand. It is a performance. She will not come alone. The man with her ran this on others before you. He is the engine. She is the steering." My hands were cold. I turned the page. This is not a guess. I have her playbook, because it is the same one that was used on me in 1987. Maine is a one-party consent state. You may record any conversation you are part of. I left the house wired 40 years ago. Esther knows the switch. Use it. I sat there for a long time, the tide coming in below me, and understood, finally. What this place was. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a weapon, and Silas Hartley had spent his last decade sharpening it for a fight he knew was coming, long after he'd be in the ground. Esther showed me the switch that evening, a small brass toggle behind a panel in the sitting room. When I asked her how a woman who kept house knew about hidden microphones, she just said, "I've been here longer than the dust, Mr. Calloway. There's nothing in these walls I haven't met." Then she said something I haven't stopped thinking about. Decent people lose to rotten ones for one simple reason. The decent ones keep trying to win clean against people who never agreed to the rules. Your uncle learned that too late. She set down a cup of tea in front of me. He made sure you wouldn't. Vanessa called 19 days later. Her voice came through soft and slow, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Wes, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. You're not wrong about that. I've been thinking about the kids, about us, about how fast everything fell apart, and how much of it a careful little catch in her throat. How much I'd take back if I could." A pause. "Could I come see you? Just to talk? I'd want to bring someone, for the kids' sake. Someone neutral." "Garrett Holloway," I said. The silence on the line told me everything. "Bring him, say, Prink, a cat," I said, and hung up. They came up the coast 2 weeks later. She wore the same perfume she'd worn the whole 8 months she was lying to me. Holloway wore the calm, oily smile of a man who'd never once been told no. I let them sit in that wired sitting room. I made coffee. I played the part of the broken, hopeful ex-husband so well, I almost convinced myself. She talked about Hazel and Eli. He talked about finding a structure that worked for everyone. She cried. Real-looking tears, I'll give her that. After an hour, I excused myself to take a phone call I'd invented, and I left the two of them alone in that room with the tide chart hanging in the boathouse below us and 40 years of patience humming inside the walls. That night, after they'd driven back to their hotel, I sat with Esther and we listened to the recording. Holloway's voice, low and pleased with itself, keep him soft. Let him think he's getting his family back. The second he agrees to move closer for the kids, we refile for full custody and use the relocation against him. The house up here, we'll have him talked into selling within the year. And then Vanessa, laughing. Light, easy, the way she used to laugh at dinner. He's the same as always, loyal as a dog. He'll believe anything if you let him hold the kids while you say it. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just felt something old and heavy settle inside me, the way a keel settles a boat in rough water. I picked up the phone and called Ashcroft in Boston. "Philip," I said, "I need an investigator." "And I think your client knew exactly what he was building." "He always did, Mr. Calloway," Ashcroft said. "He always did." The investigation took 2 months and turned up more than I'd ever imagined. Holloway hadn't just helped my wife rob me. He'd done it before. 3 other men. Same pattern. Charm the wife, drain the marriage, walk away clean. He'd moved a little over $240,000 of my money through a fake consulting LLC, registered in his paralegal's name. What I thought was a divorce was the tail end of a scheme he'd been running for the better part of a decade. I had the recordings. I had the bank trail. I had 3 other victims who, once they heard from Ashcroft, couldn't get to a phone fast enough. And then Vanessa, not knowing the ground had already shifted under her, made her final move. She filed a motion in Toledo to terminate my parental rights, claiming I'd abandoned the family by relocating to Maine. That was the moment I stopped feeling sad about any of it. I asked her to meet me at a quiet seafood place in Rockland called the Tidwater Grill. She came alone, which told me she still thought she was winning. I didn't say much. I set a folder on the table between us and slid it across. She opened it. The first page was a transcript of her own voice. "He's loyal as a dog." I watched her read it and go pale. The second page was the consulting LLC and the $240,000. The third page was a letter from a federal prosecutor in Boston, on letterhead, with Garrett Holloway's name in the subject line. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Wes, Holloway's going to prison," I said. "The only question left is whether you're standing next to him when the door closes. What do you want?" Barely a whisper. I leaned forward and kept my voice steady, because I'd waited a long time to say it calmly. You're going to drop the petition. You're going to give me primary custody, real custody, not the every other weekend insult you bought. You're going to return every dollar that's still recoverable, and you're going to sign it all inside a week. If you do, I'll keep your name out of the criminal file as far as I'm able. I sat back. If you don't, you go down with him, and our kids grow up knowing exactly why their mother wasn't there. She broke then. Really broke, in a way that wasn't a performance, and for one strange second, I felt almost sorry for her. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said, and I meant it. I spent 20 years believing that. I'm doing it because you tried to erase me, and you used our children to do it. I left her there with the cold coffee and the open folder. She signed in 5 days. Holloway was indicted that fall. He got 6 years in federal prison, lost his license, and the 3 other families got pieces of their lives back because mine had a dead man watching over it. Vanessa cooperated, took probation, and lost the career she'd built on top of all those lies. A year to the day after the bank changed my locks, the Maine estate became fully, legally mine. That afternoon, I finally opened the strongbox from the boathouse floor. I'd been saving it without knowing why. Inside was one last letter, in that same careful ink. And underneath it, a photograph. The letter was short. Wesley. In 1987, a man with a smooth voice took my wife, my money, and my 2 children, and the courts handed them over because I tried to fight fair. I never got my kids back. I spent the rest of my life building a house with teeth so that the next man in this family wouldn't have to lose what I lost. You were the one I chose. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorrier I couldn't be your family while I was alive. That Silas? The photograph was old and soft at the corners. A younger Silas Hartley, standing on the deck of one of those wooden boats, holding an infant against his chest. On the back, in pencil, Wesley, 3 days old. The only time they let me hold him. I sat on the floor of that boathouse and cried for a man I never knew, who'd held me once before the family pushed him out, and who'd spent 30 years making sure that when the world came to take everything I loved, I'd have a place to stand and a way to fight back. Tucked beneath the photo was one more document, a trust, already drafted, already signed, half of everything, set aside for Hazel and Eli. He'd protected my children before they were even born. It's spring now. Hazel and Eli live with me on Widow's Ledge. There's actually a boat in the boathouse again, one of the old wooden ones, and on weekends the 3 of us scrape and sand and varnish it. Slow work, the kind you can't rush. Esther still keeps the house. She says she'll quit any day now. She's been saying that for a year. I don't have to sit in the boathouse anymore. The condition's met, the year is up. But most evenings, when the tide's coming in, I go down there anyway and sit on that same crate where it all started, because I finally understand what the 2 hours were for. They weren't a test of patience. They were Silas teaching me, across 40 years and the grave, the one thing he learned too late, and I almost did too. You don't beat people like that by reacting faster. You beat them by being willing to wait longer. So here's what I keep wondering, late at night with the water moving under the boards. If a stranger found you on the worst morning of your life and offered you everything you'd ever lost, but only if you sat alone in a cold room 2 hours a day for a year, with no idea why, would you have the patience to find out what was waiting for you? Or would you have walked away from the one thing built to save you?